My theme for this little speech is quite simply winners and losers. It's the first part of a trilogy, but if you don't like this one, I'll never speak again. So rest assured. History often explains people and presents people as winners, when in fact they were losers, and vice versa. Sometimes people who did a pretty good job get a bad press. And history's full of it. I didn't realise we had a history graduate tonight. I'd have been more careful if I There's no better example to start with than the history of King Harold and William the Conqueror and the Battle of Hastings. Now, I just want to tell you a little bit about that, because Harold goes down as a loser, and to me he's a little bit of a hero, as a matter of fact. And he did a much better job than people tend to think he did. And William the Conqueror, well, he was a winner, but in my book he didn't really deserve to win. So my apologies to Yola in particular in this, who didn't go to an English school, and therefore this may mean not a lot to you, but I'm sure there are winners and losers in Polish history that are pretty much the same.
I'm pretty up to this.
Battle of Hastings in 1066 is a serious and important event in English history, without question. The sort of thing that every young English person should know about. A recent television quiz show, a contestant was asked, what great event happened in England in 1066 that fundamentally changed the political and social structure of the nation? Ah, he said, England won the Football World Cup. No, said the quizmaster, no, that was 1966, not 1066. Whoa, said the contestant. Was it the rugby? It's such an important part of our history that I just want to say this, that William the Conqueror, when he came to England, is often portrayed as the Frenchman who conquered the English. If any Frenchman ever says to you, that the French conquered the English in 1066, you give him, poof, the slap in the face, because William was in fact not really French at all. He was a Viking. He was descended from Vikings who came down in a raid on the north coast of France and decided to stay. That's why they call it Normandy, the land of the Northmen. And he inveigled himself into French society and French royalty through a series, well, his ancestors did, through a series of liaisons with a variety of ladies-in-waiting, kitchen maids, and girls in the parlour who ought to have known better. But gradually he became to a point where he, unbelievably, could claim a right to the English throne. And in 1066, when Harold had only been king for about a year, he came to the conclusion that the English were an unhappy lot and needed him as king. And unhappy because in England, it's true at the time, there was violence, there was tremendous trouble within families, there was intrigue, there were terrible personal relationships, and particularly amongst the nobility, because the barons, who were the main nobility at that time, were a troublesome crew. So there was intrigue and death and murder and all that kind of thing. Now these days we call that EastEnders. But in those days it was called the nobility. And the barons, the English barons, were a tremendous cause of upset. So Harold had a hard time with the barons, hadn't been king all that long, and he was starting to sort England out. And then William the Conqueror arrived in Hastings. He hadn't been aiming at Hastings, he's actually been aiming at somewhere we now call Eastbourne, but never mind, he ended up in Hastings with his rabble of an army. And so the Battle of Hastings happened. Now think of the Battle of Hastings as the FA Cup final, but with horses and archers, just to make it a bit more interesting. Okay, think of Harold's army as Chelsea, or Manchester United if you like. Well organised, well paid, everything going for them, a successful manager, highly successful in every way. And Harold, the successful manager, didn't have a mobile phone, or he might have done better. It's alright. But he had something even more interesting. He had a pet falcon that he kept. His army was famous for it. His pet falcon was his good luck charm. And wherever he went into battle, and he'd just beaten a load of Vikings up to the North Country, he had his pet falcon with him. the pet falcon is important, remember it. So, picture William's army, William the Conqueror's army, in this little football match as Millwall, if you like. A club well down the league, a rough set of lads, no great respecter of the rules, plenty of fouls thrown in, just, complete rabble, to be honest. Most of the supporters of them in the pub most of the time, but they decided to come across with William because he promised to pay them well, and he promised them that he could beat the living daylights out of the English and take all their money, so why not? Now, most of the great battles of history only lasted about an hour, sometimes only 45 minutes, Crécy, Agincourt, all the battles that you might remember. But the Battle of Hastings went on quite a while. In fact, it went the full 90 minutes, the full match. And there was no score, because Harold and his mob were up on the hill, well organised, shields out. William and all his rabble were down, running back and forward. Nobody was making any progress. Harold was going to be a winner, there was no doubt about it. So it went on. Now, you see, battles didn't last all that long, because hacking people to bits is pretty hard work. And you can't do it for longer than an hour, can you, when you really think about it? But this one went on. And it went on to extra time, and there was still no score. And, Harold, well, he was just there, he was going to win, he was up on the hill. But then something terrible happened, as often happens with a bunch of lads. They'd all had a few jars at half-time, in Harold's army, and a mob of them, seeing the French sort of retreating, ran after them, thinking that they could score a goal, ended up at the wrong side of the pitch, and were sent off for being drunk and disorderly. In fact, drunk, disorderly, and dead, because they got massacred, and that was the end of the Battle of Hastings. So you see how poor Harold, who'd organised it so well, was let down by a bunch of lads who just had too much to drink. It wasn't really his fault. And then Harold, of course, up in the stands, watching the battle, suddenly his pet falcon left his arm, and that was significant because it was kind of one of those omens that people believed in at that time. And so Harold, who was noted to have been very short-sighted, was squinting up in the sky looking for the pet falcon, when famously, yes, he got an arrow in the eye. What a thing to happen. That was just too bad. No sympathy. Should have gone to Specsavers. Anyway, that was game over. Harold and his mob sort of went home, no trophy, and William was in charge of the people of England. He hated the people of England. That's us, the rough, he called them, the rough. And he gave us all a very hard time, but he did a few good things. First, he sorted out all the troublesome barons. He told them that he promised them wealth and land, and he invited them to a big meeting where it would be given out to them. And when they arrived, he had their heads chopped off, one after the other, smashing way to succeed in everything. The original severance package. Anyway, then he invented a new aristocracy, took away all the English aristocrats and presented them with the same solution as the barons, and created a whole new aristocracy, which is why we have titles like Duke and Viscount and Marquis and a few others. They're all French, they're all not English at all, despite the fact that the royalty crave them. So, if you ever see that Frenchman again, give him a slap in the face just for that. Now, William set up a system of taxation that we still have today, and if you didn't pay your taxes, you got your head chopped off. Now they only take an arm and a leg because things are different. And there's one thing that I thought I might not have time to do, and I haven't, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway, because this is one of the important points. Now, in those days, I hesitate to say this with so many strong-minded women in the room, but in those days, women were regarded as chattels. They were regarded as the possession of men. And it just so happened that way. They had to do what they were told and keep to themselves. And in fact, in any sort of meeting, they would be pushed so that they would all sit together in one place. Sometimes under the guardianship of a man, just to make sure they behave themselves. But William's great contribution to equality was he took a real interest in the women of England. Oh yes, he took a very serious and long-term interest in the women of England. And It said that there was no woman safe from him. But there it is. He was interested in equality, and he gave women choice. He was the first king of England who ever gave women a genuine choice. He didn't mind which side of the bed they climbed in. So, if you've always lived in England, then it's pretty much for sure that you've got some of William's DNA in your bones and in your blood. It's quite probable. And if you're embarrassed to think that your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother might have been a bit of a naughty girl, well, console yourself to think that you're connected to royalty and one of the winners.